I'm going to teach you how to do an image trace in Illustrator. So if you don't know how to do this, this is a really good way to get some clear shapes for your composition for your inspired color project. You can do this in Photoshop too. There's another video that explains that. This way kind of gives you a little bit more control, I think, over the shapes, and you can edit it a bit before you print it out if you so wish to do. And I just like working in Illustrator. The other thing this does is it actually allows you to just look at the line work, the outlines, instead of everything inside of it. So let's get started. I'm going to go up here to Illustrator. I'm going to go to File and then New. And I'm just going to make a artboard the size of a regular letter size piece of paper. If you have the ability to print larger, so if you can print tabloid size 11 by 17, by all means you can create it, pretty big, or just whatever you happen to have works just fine. So I can print at 11 by 17, but I'm going to go ahead and choose to make it just regular letter size. So I'm going to make my width 11 inches and my height 8.5. Sorry, 8.5. And so my picture is horizontal, so that's why I'm making my orientation horizontal. If I was doing a vertical image, I would choose vertical, obviously. So do whatever's going to fit your picture best. And I'm going to click Create. And here's my artboard, which is great. So if you've never worked in Illustrator, we're only going to have to do a few things in here, so you don't have to know everything to do this and have it work. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and I want to place the image into my document. So what I'm going to do is go to File and then Place. And my computer is a bit slow, so bear with me. And then it's going to give me a little thumbnail preview. I'm just going to stick it on here. And you can see it's pretty large. I think it's like 20 inches wide. I don't need it that wide, so I'm going to hover over it with my box selected. You can tell when an object is selected because this blue line shows up around it, and it also has this X in the center of it. So I'm going to hold the Shift key, and when I hover over the corner, it turns into the little arrows, and then I'm just going to hold the Shift key, constraining my proportions, and then I'm just going to make it fit on my page. So the assignment instructions say that you should have your longest side be 12 inches. Obviously that might not be possible for everybody right now. That's fine. So I'm going to make this fit and to what I think my printer can do, so I'm going to make it 10 inches. Just make it as big as you possibly can. If you can't make it 12 inches, just make it as large as you can. So that's that. There we go. Doesn't matter where really it exists on our page because we can cut it out. We can just line it up with where we want it to be on our illustration board. Okay, so I have my image on my artboard. I'm going to make sure it's selected with my black arrow tool. That's the selection tool right here. And then you'll notice at the top some options pop up when you click on your object here. So what this is going to tell me is what this image is called and where it exists on my desktop. It's going to tell me my pixels per inch, my resolution. It's 192. Again, that doesn't matter because we're just using this for reference. But the smaller I make this, the higher that goes. And then there's a few options I can actually do with the image itself. What we're looking for is this thing called image trace. So this is a really kind of cool thing that Illustrator does. It'll look at an image that was raster or created with pixels. It will kind of simplify it, define it into objects that are vector objects, which are created with points in space. So it's turning something in that has maybe limited use with how big it can get into something that can be infinitely enlarged or shrunk, and it will look exactly the same. So that's pretty great. So there's a little arrow right next to image trace that gives you some options. So there's a few different things that you can do, that you can look at. What I really want you to look at though is these options right here. So 3 colors, 6 colors, 16 colors, and then shades of gray. So if you watched the Photoshop video, if you happen to see that, the more shades or the more colors that are included in your options, the more detailed and numerous those shapes are going to be. So if you want something a little more simplified, you probably want to select like 3 or 6. 3 colors isn't really going to give you a whole lot though. I don't recommend that. It's just not, it's going to simplify things a little bit too much. 6 colors is probably really good. 16 is going to be pretty complicated. So if you have a really complex image, that's going to give you a ton of shapes, and you might not be super happy with yourself having to transfer all those and then paint them. So I'm going to do 6 colors. I think that's a pretty good middle range. So I'm going to select that. And then it's going to take a little bit of time. The larger your photo, the longer this takes. So just be a little bit patient. It's going to look at the photo. It's going to kind of determine which colors and values are alike, and it's going to group those into shapes. So here's our result. That's pretty cool, actually. So if I zoom in, just grab my magnifying glass, you can kind of see the result is a little smoother than what we get in Photoshop. All of these are now paths that you can actually edit if you want. If you want to edit things, you got to click on it one more time. So Illustrator shows you a preview basically of what it looks like, but it doesn't actually become paths that you can edit until you click expand up here. So as soon as I click on my image that I've traced, I have the option to expand it. So watch what happens. All right, so it went from one big blue square with the X in the center to all of these individual shapes. So to grab those individual shapes, I can use my direct selection tool, which is my white arrow tool. So black arrow tool is going to select an entire object or an entire thing. A direct selection is going to select an individual object within a group, like we have here, or you can actually select individual points. So when I select it with this, see all those little dots? Those are all the vectors that this is made up of. So it gets to be pretty complex, which is fine. But you can kind of see like there's a few areas that may be difficult to paint or to translate. You can decide just not to trace those later on, but if you want to delete them, you can. Or if you want to change their color, so you can grab like this brown, and then I'm going to go up to my swatches and add it. Where are my swatches? If you can't find something on the right hand side here, you can always go to Window and then open it up. So swatches. Sometimes I just can't see where the thing is, so I'm just going to add this. So then I can click on just these little guys, and I can turn them the same color. So, you know, that way I can see if it's really necessary. So it's kind of a nice way, but again, not necessary because you have the additional step of transferring everything. So you can always make an artistic decision to leave something off or simplify it further. Okay, so that's looking pretty cool. I'll show you what shades of gray does as well. So this keeps kind of the color information. Again, it doesn't matter what the color is because, well, we're going to change it. We're going to add in our inspired palette, But if you want to start with just black and white, you want to look at just the value structure, you can do that pretty easily. So I'm just going to delete this and re-import it so I don't have to hit undo a bunch of times. Again, you can always hit Command Z or Control Z depending on your operating system. You can't break Illustrator. Believe me, I've tried. And you cannot. So don't worry. All right, just about 10 inches. I'm going to go to Image Trace, and I'm going to do Shades of Gray. So the other options in Image Trace, like line art, logo, things like that, those are if you have already like just black and white lines or sketches or drawings or something like that. It's pretty good at tracing those. A lot of people use it if they get sent, like for designers, if you get sent a logo that isn't a vector file, you can easily turn it into one. So, okay, here is my finished results. You can see there's a lot more information here. Probably too much for me, but you get a little bit more information in her jacket versus doing just the 6 colors. So there's actually like more of a separation in those darker values, which is cool. There's a lot more separation here in terms of where those highlights are. It just gives you a different result. So you have to kind of see what you're happy with. So play around with it. Personally, I like the limited color one. So I'm going to go back to that just because I like the more simplified shapes. I think they look good. But again, you do you. Okay. All right. So image trace, 6 colors. That's right. Super weird talking to myself in my studio. This is exactly what I would be doing in class too, is just rambling while this happens. So you're getting the full effect. All right, cool. So what I can do is after I click expand, if I want to actually just see the lines and not worry about like looking at the colors or the value or anything, what you can actually do is turn this into kind of what a paint by number looks like, or like a coloring book, one of those adult coloring books that's really complex. So I'm going to click on this, select everything, and then over here in my left-hand palette, I have my fill color, and it has a question mark because I have more than one color selected with no stroke. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to click the thing right below it. That's the default fill and stroke. So default is white fill with a black stroke, so a black line around all the shapes. That's what I want. Check that out. That looks pretty wild, right? So again, it looks like a paint by number. You just have those outlines, and some of them are pretty intense, like what's happening here. Again, if you are freaked out by that, or you want to kind of smooth those out, you definitely can. Just make sure it kind of retains the integrity of your piece. So that's pretty much that. So this allows you to let the computer do the work for you. But if you want to do it by hand, if you want to make those choices, you definitely can. So check out the video on how to do this by hand. All right, thank you very much. Let me know if you have any questions.